good to come back. And always good to be able to give an update about what God has been doing. And there is some news. God has been faithful. I thought maybe by now things would start slowing down. God said, I'm going to say thank you here at Creekside for your faithful support through the years. And I was thinking, yeah, it's been over 2 decades that this has been realized. Seriously, on a monthly basis, you give, you pray, you stand with me. And the fact that you are faithful in that is such an assurance to know that I can just continue to do what God has called me to do. So keep up the good work. Let's continue this partnership. And I'm so glad that we get to share this a little bit here tonight so you can get a little bit better idea about what's over there and how to pray. Amen. Micronesia. In the past, you've heard me talk about places like the Marshall Islands and Kiribati, and even a little island called Koshrai. Does that ring any bells for you? Well, all of those areas, all of those nations are in a place known as Micronesia, the tiny islands of the Pacific. And it is beautiful there, isn't it? I will not tell you, look at that. I mean, look at that sunset. It's absolutely gorgeous. I pass it like every day. I look out across the street and there's that beautiful sunset. We have beautiful, next slide, we'll show you our mountains and our palm trees. It's absolutely a gorgeous place. I eat tuna fish for lunch as much as I want to. Take a look at that. Next slide. There you go. Of course, I gotta clean it myself, but you don't get it any fresher than that, right?
Wow, look at that.
Honestly, it is a wonderful thing to be serving in a place called Micronesia. Now, we could sit down and I could tell you a number of reasons why you might not want to live there, but I want you to see what keeps me going back time and time again. Go ahead and hit that next slide. Look at those faces. Look at that. Look at those little eyes. Can you tell how impish those little boys can be, right? Kids are kids no matter where you go. And I'm the privileged one who gets to be a missionary to reach the children in Micronesia. And they are precious. It has been a joy. So let's get a little geography out of the way. So let's look at that map on the next slide. And I want you to take notice of all those little blue dots up there. Did you have any idea that there were that many islands out in the Pacific Ocean? Thousands, literally thousands. And that map doesn't even do it all. Most maps I pass don't show any of the islands, so I tend to carry a Sharpie around so I can add in islands when I see maps, but I'll refrain tonight. But that is an area of the world known as Pacific Oceania, or the islands of the Pacific. And the next slide will show you the region, the little portion of that area that is known as Micronesia. You see that little circled area? So within that circled area, there's actually about 2,000 islands. Wow. I mean, sure, some of them are really tiny, and only about half of them are populated, but it's still 1,000 islands. It's absolutely crazy. And I love it that God has a heart for the islands. God has not forgotten the islands. As a matter of fact, he speaks about the islands in his word. Look at this verse. It says, next slide, it says, far-flung ocean islands wait expectantly for his teaching. Isn't that a great verse? Far-flung ocean islands. It's the message, I have to admit. But when I hear that verse, it kind of makes me think of a Frisbee. And because what else do you fling but a Frisbee, right? You fling far, so after you fling it, then it's flung, right? And I get this picture of God on creation day going, okay, I'm going to put one over there, and another one over there, and another one over there, and over there, and over there. And here's God creating a world filled with little islands that he cares about. Pastor Chuck, this one's for you. There you go. All right? But I want us to pay attention to the second half of that verse, because it says this: they wait expectantly for his teaching. Now let me tell you about Micronesia. Micronesia is not one of those places where people have never heard the gospel. Back in the 1800s, when missionaries were kind of closing shop in Hawaii because they had established a church, they began to move out from there, and they began to infiltrate all the islands, and they went island to island, village to village, chief to chief. And in each of those places, they saw God do amazing things as people turned away from their pagan ways and they turned to serve the living God. It's beautiful. I can't wait to meet the missionaries in heaven. that were there and that were a part of what happened back in the 1800s. But sadly, what has happened through the years is that there is this remnant of a sense of Christianity that remains. A lot of people come and think, wow, that's actually pretty cool. Like, people really go to church on Sunday here. And actually, on a lot of the islands, it's very popular to go to church on Sunday. Like, people do church. They do religious activity. You know, they know what clothes to wear and when to stand up and when to sit down. And they make Sundays holy. As a matter of fact, in Micronesia, in Koshai in particular, if you go get caught fishing on a Sunday, you can actually be arrested because it's against the law. Wow. Sounds nice, right? But the problem is you've got a whole lot of people who are very involved in a lot of religious activity, who are trying to prove themselves good enough to be considered Christian, but who have no real relationship with Jesus Christ. You see, it's a very legalistic society. It's a society where people are constantly trying to compare themselves with one another, because that's what happens with legalism, right? Well, I'm better than he is, right? And so what we do is we constantly look at the outward and we never look at the heart. And it's in the heart where we see our great need for God. And I love that the Word of God says that it is by faith, but because of grace, through grace and faith that we are saved. It is a gift of God. It is not anything of works that we would do, because we can't boast in it. It is not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy that he saved us. And I tell you today, in Micronesia, there are still a people that are waiting expectantly for the truth of the gospel, the message of grace. They need to be set free from their religious activity. So let's take a look at a little bit of my history. So I started, next map will show you, I started back in 1993, 26 years ago, I can't believe it, in the Marshall Islands. And I served there as a missionary associate. And if you don't know about that, let me explain. A missionary associate is someone who goes to serve under another missionary for a stint of 1 to 2 years, typically. So I made a 2-year commitment. I went and I taught little kids in a Christian school, little kindergarten and first graders. And I tell you what, those kids were all grown up, and thank God for Facebook. We're in touch with so many of them. Many of them are serving Jesus to this day. It's wonderful. And I thank God for that experience. From there, I moved to a place called Kiribati. Next slide will show you that one. And Kiribati is also in Micronesia, another little place. I spent about 13 years there serving with the church, helping to lead a Bible school. Wow, I had no idea that was going to happen to me. But God just opened so many doors for me to help in areas of discipleship and with children's ministries and in so many different ways. And then in the year 2010, I moved to this next island on the next slide of Koshai. And Koshai is actually one of the states in the Federated States of Micronesia. So now this is the third island country that I've lived in. And each where I've gone, I've learned a different language. In the Marshalls, they speak Marshallese. Yawaintola, good evening. And then in Kiribati, they speak Kiribati. Good evening. And then I moved on to this place called Koshai, and they speak Koshayan, Egewo. And everywhere I go, I've had to learn another language. Because the gospel is all about communication, isn't it? It's about sharing the truth. And if we don't do that in a language that the people understand, then how could we possibly really connect? But I thank God for all those experiences. And this last term especially, we've done a lot with kids ministries. Take a look at these. These are some of the kids that we've visited. We've gone village to village. And what's really neat about living in a place where people actually go to church, even if they don't know God, is they do know the word. They do know the stories, you know? So we would go and we would reach these children and we build on their head knowledge and help them to have a true relationship with Jesus Christ. And we had freedom to go village to village. This is the village of Layla. The next slide will show a place called Wallong. And look at them, they're just so ready and eager to listen. And Wallong's an interesting place. It's kind of like one of those you can't get there from here kind of places. Because in the middle of the island there's this jungle area you could just never get through. So you have to kind of get on a boat and go all the way around. And we do that. Why? Because the kids need to hear the truth of the gospel, and God made open doors for us. The next slide shows in our home church and the children of that neighborhood who came in and sincerely gave their hearts to Jesus and began to follow hard after him. Wow. And I'm really excited about what God has done. But as I look ahead, I know that God has even more in store than I could ever have dreamed. It was about a year ago, and I knew I'd be coming back for a furlough, and I knew that there was going to be an interruption in my ministry. As an Assembly of God missionary, I spent about 4 years on the field, and then that 5th year I come and I spend it here. Because this is so valuable. It's so important for you to know, to really know what's going on the field, and to know what you're investing in as you pray and as you give. And I knew that interruption was coming, and I said, God, what do you have for me? What is it that you want me to do? Do you want me to go back to Kushai? Do you want me to go somewhere else? What is the plan? God, help me to know. And I thank God that as time went on, not always as quick as I wanted it, but God began to unfold his plan. And the next slide says, God is beginning to do something new in my heart. And I saw the Lord doing something. I saw him causing me to open my eyes to things that I hadn't noticed before. And it reminds me of when Jesus was walking with his disciples and he said, I want you to look out in the fields. I want you to look up and I want you to notice something. They are white unto harvest. And Jesus just caused them to look up. And I felt like the Holy Spirit was saying, Diane, I want you to look up. I want you to start noticing other places. I want you to start noticing things that you hadn't noticed before. There's a quote I want to share with you. Next slide says, this is from a missionary who actually gave his life in the South Pacific. John Williams, if you read his story, it's amazing. He was actually cannibalized. But the fruit of his life, it's amazing. And he said this, he said, for my own part, I cannot content myself within the narrow limits of a single reef. And what was he saying? He was saying, I can't stay on one little island when there are so many more that need to be reached. When there are so many more that need to know the truth of the gospel. I can't stay here any longer. And I felt the Holy Spirit just speaking that in my heart. For the last almost 10 years, I've been on an island of 42 square miles, of about 6,000 people, working with one local church, going to small little villages, and I thank God for every bit of fruit. But God said, that's not all I have for you, Diane. And sometimes the Holy Spirit, he speaks through silly things. Things like this song that just burned in my heart. And maybe you'll recognize it, where it says, see the line where the sky meets the sea, it calls me. Any Moana fans out there? I feel like as I look out to the sea, I know that there are other places with great, great need. As a matter of fact, when we look at all of Micronesia, there's only myself and another family that are serving out there as Assembly of God missionaries right now. The need is enormous. So how can I stay in one place? Well, all of that unfolded a plan that God has. That when I go back, next slide will show, I am taking all of Micronesia. That sounds really bold and brave, and that's not who I am. But that's who God is. And I want you to take a look at that whole region. Let's hit that next slide, actually. It'll show you there's actually 7 different nations and territories in Micronesia. Okay, so we'll start with the Marshall Islands, where I started, okay? Yahweh. And then there's that place called Kiribati, where I spent about 13 years. I'm going back there. Oh, I love it. I knew I wasn't done. I knew it. There's a place called the Federated States of Micronesia, and if you take a look, there's 4 stars. One of those stars is for Kushai, because Kushai is actually a state, not a country. Okay? I'm going back. Yes, I am. There's a place called Guam. But wait a minute, that's America. Well, it is American territory, but there's people there. There's a church there. There's a work to be done there. Amen? There's another place. This is also U.S. territory. It's known as the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. Includes places like Saipan, Tinian, Rhoda. I don't know if that rings any bells for you. It sure does for me. There's another place called Palau. I've been in Palau a number of times, and most recently in September. And this is where our other family serves, and the needs there are enormous as well. Vast. People come from all over the world to live in Palau. It's kind of crazy. And then there's this tiny little place called Nauru. Now I'm going to tell you stories about Nauru. Nauru is like the smallest country in the world. You can drive around the whole island in 14 miles, that's it. And that's it, that's just it. And the only like states that are smaller than Nauru are like the Vatican and Monaco, that's it. Nauru is like little. And what's interesting is Nauru used to be the wealthiest nation per capita in the world. And this is just a crazy thing. It's because of something called phosphate. And phosphate comes from, but it comes from bird poop, all right? And so they had all of this phosphate that had been deposited on this island because of the birds, and it became like a major commodity for this nation. And they came up with so much money out of this. And the Nauruan people became very frivolous. They were known as people who would wear clothes once and then toss them aside. And my good friends who are from Kiribati, who lived there at the time would be, they were there doing all the work, right? Well, the Nauruans were wearing gold jewelry and spending money, and they would like pick up all those clothes and the dishes they'd toss aside and whatever, because they just had so much. And then they ran out. Like they really mined the place out, and there's a little dribble left, but I mean, not like before. And the economy hit rock bottom. And I tell you what, they crashed. And when they crashed, it became an incredible time for the gospel. Now, our Assembly of God work in Nauru, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing. On that little drive around 14-mile little island, there's 7 churches. And they're constantly saying, like, where else can we go? Because we want to share the gospel and we've run out of place here, But I got to tell you something interesting about Nauru. A few years ago, Australia knew that Nauru was in trouble, and Australia said they've got a connection there. And they said, we can help you out. Let's make a deal. And so Nauru said, if you give us a plot of land, we just want a piece of land. They don't have that much of it, but if you can give us this piece of land, then we'll supply you with lots of funds. Well, what they did is they set up a refugee camp for all these asylum seekers who were showing up on Australian soil that they didn't want to let on Australian soil. And they sent the worst of the worst, or perceivably the worst of the worst, to Nauru. The extremist Muslims, etc., the ones that they most feared, they sent to Nauru. Well, the church in Nauru, they're not sleeping. And they didn't see that as a threat, they saw it as a mission field. And they have gone into that camp again and again and again. And they've preached the gospel, and God has shown up. There have been dreams and visions, and Muslims have given their hearts to Jesus. They have been baptized, and God is doing cool things on a place called Nauru. Isn't that awesome? Micronesia, 7 nations and territories. And that's the place that I'm going back to. I want to share with you tonight the real passion of my heart. What God has really stirred my heart that I know that I must do as I return. And this next slide will share the scripture from Psalm 78. And it says, "Oh, my people, listen to my instructions. Open your ears to what I am saying, for I will speak to you in a parable. I will teach you hidden lessons from our past, stories we have heard and known, stories our ancestors handed down to us." Next slide. "We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. For he issued his law to Jacob. He gave his instructions to Israel. He commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children, so the next generation might know them, even the children not yet born. And they in turn will teach their own children. So each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands." And that, my friends, is the word of the Lord. God has given me a passion. It's something that he spoke to my heart many years ago when I sat in a Bible school chapel, and the Holy Spirit said to me, Diane, I'm sending you to the children of the world. I look at what's going on in our own nation here in America, and it's frightening.
Yes.
It's absolutely frightening. If you go into most of our public schools today, you will find that most of those children have never set foot in a church. There's a generation that is rising up that does not know God. And we have a responsibility that God has given to us. As a matter of fact, Deuteronomy 6, Moses talked about it as he said, okay, here's the law. This is the word of God. And he made it clear that God's command was that as parents, as people of God, that we must take it seriously, that we must teach our children the things of God. And he said, when you rise up in the morning, tell your kids about God. And when you're sitting in the house, tell your kids about God. When you're walking along the way, tell them what God has done. And when you go to sleep at night, let's tell them again. You see, the children need to know. And I come away from these verses saying this: we will tell them. Next slide. We will tell them. We will tell the children. And we need to do that here in America, and we need to do it over in Micronesia. You see, sometimes we get this idea that the gospel is for adults. That, sometime they'll grow up and they'll make a decision for themselves. But the Word of God is very clear that we must train up a child in the way they should go, and then they'll walk in that way. They will not depart. The Word of God is very clear that we have a part in bringing children to Jesus. Let them come, he said. The Word of God is very clear that we have a part in passing faith to the next generation. Judges chapter 2, this next verse here, well, it tells a story that to me is very, very sad. It says, after that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. So what do we have here? We have a group of people who knew God, and then they died. But before they died, they never passed it on to the children. And so now you have a whole generation who know nothing about God, have no relationship with him whatsoever. And if you read on in this chapter, you'll see that they did detestable things in the eyes of God. They worshipped idols. They were far, far from God. And there was this downward spiral. And when I read that, it saddens my heart, and I look at our own nation. And church, we need to rise up. And I know that it's the job of parents, but how many of you know, I heard some discussion here, sometimes the parents aren't doing it. And we need to rise up, and we need to tell them. We need to tell them. And I look out at this crowd, and some of you have children of your own, you have grandchildren of your own. Maybe there's even some great-grandchildren, there's nieces, there's nephews, there's neighbors, there's children that you know that need to know the truth about Jesus. There's an organization out there, it's called the 414 Window. Have you heard of it? Anybody? The 414 Window is all about reaching children. Because what they've discovered, they do a lot of statistics, is that most people who come to Christ do so between the ages of 4 and 14. So there's that open window between 4 and 14, 414 window. It's at that time when most people, not all, there's certainly exceptions. I was 15, but I also know God was working when I was younger. That's the time to reach kids. And I think of that parable that Jesus taught about the sower and the seed. Remember how some seed fell among the thorns and some fell in the rocks, and then there was some that fell on the good soil and it grew up well. Well, I'm going to tell you, the heart of a child, that's the good soil. Because you tell a child and they believe. You tell a child and they hear. You tell a child and they're ready to listen. You tell a child and you help them to walk in it, and you can make a difference for their whole lives. It's fertile, fertile soil. Even with the work of the enemy against their hearts. But the younger we reach them, the better it is. Because it's a window. It's actually a window that's closing. I was in a Christian school a few months ago, and while I was there, I was asked to do chapels. And they said, do you mind doing 2 chapels? We'll do one for the younger kids, and then we'll do another one for the older kids. I said, sure, that's great. Basically did the same material, but I purged it a little differently because different ages. So first came in these cute little kindergarten to 3rd graders, you know. They come in, they're so cute, and they all sit down in their rows. And I told them all about being a missionary and about how God cares about the children of the world. And as I came to the close of that service, I said, I want to pray for you. And I said, if God wanted you to be a missionary, what would you say? And their little hands flew up in the air almost unanimously. And they all were like, yes, I'd say yes. And I thought, wow, that is so awesome. And I prayed over those children that God would speak to their hearts and that they would continue to say yes to Jesus all the days of their lives. And that little chapel ended and they filed out, and in came the bigger kids, you know, 4th to 8th grade. And they come in and I begin to share with them, and they're, you know, responding as well. And I get to the end of that service and I said, now let me ask you, what would you say if God asked you to be a missionary? And it was silent like this. Finally, one little boy spoke up and he said, I'd have to think about it. Still little kids, still young, but not so ready to say yes to God.
See it? Yeah.
There's a window that's closing. And we can't afford to lose another generation. Not here in America and not in the islands of the Pacific. We can't afford to lose them. And I come away from this story saying, God, help me to tell them. Help me to tell them. We will tell them. Please, God, help us, each of us, to tell the children while they are young. And you know, we don't want to just tell them because it's more than just saying it. It's more than just head knowledge. We want to see children truly respond to God and open their hearts to Him. We want to see them really give their lives to Him. We want to see them walk with Him, not just as children, but into their teen years and through those tumultuous teen years and into their adulthood. We want to walk with them and show them the way to follow after God. So we will tell them. I'm excited when I go back to Micronesia. God has provided us with a, God's put on my heart, we need a team. You know, I can't be doing this alone anymore. And so I want you to see, this is Brenda and Francisco. And I met them on an island of South Pacific island nation of Tonga a couple of years ago, almost 3 years ago. And they're from El Salvador. And they're beautiful. Oh my goodness, they're beautiful. If you know anything about El Salvador and missions, they do kids ministry big. They have a program that has gone throughout El Salvador and actually throughout the world called Castillo del Rey, or King's Castle. And these kids grew up in that. I mean, they know King's Castle. They know about reaching children for Jesus Christ and helping them, discipling them through adulthood. And you know what they're doing right now? They're doing exactly what I'm doing, but they're down in El Salvador. And they're going church to church, and they're looking for those who would pray, and those who would give, and those who would partner with them, so that they can come and serve alongside me in Micronesia. Woohoo! I'm excited. I'm really excited about that. And I believe that God has others that He is working on their hearts, so that we can go back, next slide, and tell those kids about Jesus. Amen? They need, you know, there's a lot of things that we need in life, but nobody needs Jesus. Anything more than they need Jesus. Next slide. We're going to tell those kids when we pass them by the road. We're going to tell the little girls when they come to church. And so with all of this in mind, I'm making another move. As a matter of fact, I made another move. Before I left for this furlough, I packed up all my belongings, put it in a shipping container, got it down to the shipyard, got on a plane, went and met it to a place called Ponape. Ponape is not much further from Koshai, and to go ahead and hit that next slide, it's a pretty little island. It's actually another one of these stars, because it's another state in the Federated States of Micronesia, so I'm in the same country. And so from there is where I'll be living. There's a reason for that. If you take a look at that next slide, you'll see Ponape is, back up a little bit to that map. There you go. Ponape is located more centrally, and so from there, I'll be able to get to all those other nations like cheaper. And there's like more flights, more frequent flights, more airlines. It will just be a better place for me to live from. And so here we go, island number 4. And so yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna tell those kids about Jesus. Look at those boys, there he is. Next slide, I saw this little kid by a market. Don't they need Jesus, you know? And it's not just about the little ones, it's also about the youth. And go ahead and hit that slide. These are some of my kids that I watched grow up in children's ministry. And now, we need to continue to walk with them. Because the enemy really wants to snatch them away in those teen years. And I see that, the need to walk alongside them and to work with them and to help them to follow Jesus. Amen? And here's the key. Next slide. The key is, back up. The key is that I train others to do this. When I look at all these places, there's about 15 languages. There's no way that I'm learning 15 languages. No, I'm starting to struggle already with just 3, and I'll be working on my 4th. But my idea, and I believe God's plan, is for me to go to each of, like the center for each of those language groups, and to seek out those with the same kind of heart, who get it, and who understand that we must reach the children, we must win them, and we must disciple them. And my heart is to pour into those, me and a team that works with me, so that we can really see those islands transformed. So if we can train other leaders, then they can train others, and they can reach the children in their language groups. That is the desire of my heart. I don't have a lot more years to give in this, but I want to give my best, because I want to see a generation transformed, not just on one little island anymore, but throughout Micronesia. And so, yes, I ask you to pray. I ask you to pray like you've never prayed before. You know, I go church to church and I share about this, and most people are like, where's Micronesia? I never heard of it. And that's the thing, like, who's praying for Micronesia? I mean, seriously, if you haven't heard of it, you're probably not praying for it unless you're in your prayer language. But I'd like to say, you've heard of Micronesia, tag, you are it, okay? You're it, you are it. And so, like every other missionary that comes through, I came with pictures of myself. Isn't that crazy we do that? I hate doing this, but at the same time, I love it that I can put in front of you a reminder to pray. For me, because now you have this familiar face in front of you, but also for the children of Micronesia. So I've got plenty out at the table over there. Take one for yourself or somebody else who didn't come. I'll leave some here at the church. I need people who would pray, who would truly pray. And I challenge you to pray pacifically. Specifically, okay? And the best way to do that is to get on my newsletter list. Because if you're on my newsletter list, then you get the prayer requests as they come out, and you know exactly how to pray. So I've got a little sign-up sheet out there. You just give me your name, your email address, and if you're saying, no, I don't do email, give me your regular address. If you'll pray, I'll put a stamp on it, okay? Not a problem, because we need people who will pray. This is a huge project. This is so much bigger than me, that I need your prayers. The next thing I'm going to challenge you to do is to give. And I'm a little humbled because you guys are amazingly faithful. You support me generously month after month. Pastor Chuck just passed me a generous check to help in my work. You have been faithful. I share this because God's asking me to do more. And there have been churches who say, okay, we can increase our pledge a little bit, or we can do a little bit more, or maybe there's individuals who could do a little bit more. I've got places to go. These trips, it's costly. My budget's coming. But is it worth it? Well, I was at a school, or a church, I guess it was, a little children's church, and some of the kids had some questions. They were eating snack, and one of the little boys stood up and he said, Miss Diane, how much does it cost to go to the different islands? And it really it depends on where you're going. You could be anywhere from $300 to $1,500, depending on where you're going.
Wow.
And so I said, well, hundreds of dollars, because that was kind of a generic answer. And I said, it's pretty expensive. And he said to me, he asked me, but isn't it worth it? yes, yes. So I'm challenging God's people to give. Even those who go already are so faithful and such a blessing to me. I'll just leave that there. And the last thing I want to talk about is going. For the majority of my time as a missionary, I've served alone. I've served in places where I've worked alongside a national church, and that's been great. I haven't had other missionaries serve with me. But the task has become so enormous that I can't do that anymore. And I believe that God is challenging my heart to put a word out there that we need workers. We already know that Jesus said, go into all the world. You know, today we celebrate Pentecost Sunday, right? And you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria and the uttermost parts of the earth. You know? A few months ago, I was asked to be a field coordinator for all of Micronesia, which means I don't have the luxury of just focusing on children's ministry. That will certainly be a number one focus in my life, but I can't overlook the fact that in some of our nations, there's no place to train to be a pastor, which means we have no plan for next generation pastors. We need workers. In many of our places, there are so many areas there's need for church planting. And honestly, my island brothers, some of them are great at that, and some of them not so much. And we need people who come alongside them and be a support to them and help them and work alongside them. We need help in the area of community development and, of course, children's ministry. And then there's youth ministry, because it's really not the same as children. It's the same heart, but it's a whole different thing. Something interesting about the islands is that, you've got a lot of these tiny little outer islands and all these little places, and these little outer islands, they might have an elementary school, but they never have a high school. Because they expect all the high school students at, age 14, to come to a central location, to go to a central high school. So imagine your kids leaving home, not at 18 to go to college, but at 14 to go to high school. And we have a dream, because we want to reach those kids. We want to change a generation. We have a dream of putting youth centers right next to those schools, right next to those dormitories. Places where they can come in and they can play basketball and they can have help with their homework, and we can share Jesus with them. We can win them. We can show them the way. But all of that takes people. And I don't know who you are, and you may already be sitting there, well, yeah, that's not for me. And can I challenge you to not say that's not for me? Okay? Can I challenge you to just say, Jesus, is it me? And if this tugs on your heart even a little bit tonight, would you talk to me before you leave tonight? Would you do that? I promise I won't tie you down or anything. I won't, nail your name. I won't put you on the next plane over. No, that's not the way it goes. But I will start praying for you. And I'd like to start a conversation, if at all there's a chance, that maybe, just maybe, there'd be somebody from Creekside that would go and serve in a place called Micronesia, way out in the Pacific. You're a treasure to me. Your partnership, your friendship, your kindness is so precious to me. God bless you.
Amen. I'm excited to listen and to be motivated to recognize the needs around the world. It's there are tremendous needs, as Diana shared with us. And I'm so grateful God has just put that passion in her heart to reach kids for Christ and to be able to do that in that part of the world. But I want you to know, as she shared with us, it's hard to find children's workers. You can't find them. We've sent letters out to the Assembly of God churches and looking for a children's pastor, and we have gotten no responses, not even one. And I'm looking at the situation in the world today and recognizing, as you have shared with us so beautifully, the fact is this next generation desperately needs the Lord. And we really need to be praying for Diane, for the work that she's going to be doing, and that God will, in fact, raise up more and more workers to do the work of God, and to let God's You know, sometimes we say we're too old to go. We just, we just can't go. The younger people need to be the ones to go. But I have seen many older folks that have been willing to give their lives and to go and share the mission field. And I just want to mention Maritza Alvarez. Some of you know her.
She's good, yes.
Dave and I taught with her in school and for a long time, and she took all of her retirement money, and she uses her retirement money to go to Africa and to share the gospel with those in Africa. She's actually working in the school and dealing with kids and sharing with them the message of Christ and the grace of God, which is so necessary. So no one's too old, and even in retirement years, there are opportunities to serve the Lord in one way or another. So I'm grateful to God for all that He has done and all that He continues to do. I thank God for you, Diane, and we're praying that God will bless you and raise up those workers that need to be raised up. We're going to pray in a minute for her very specifically. But we also want to pray for Brother Mark tonight. This Wednesday is the surgery, and Mark has desired and has asked us to pray every service, and we've done that. Every service, we're believing God for His absolute healing. And maybe God will use the physicians, however God desires to work. It makes no difference, but we are grateful to God. We can continue to trust the Lord, believe God for victory and for His presence to go with Mark in a very special way. The presence of God, as I shared this morning on Pentecost Sunday, that we might be in a place where we will be singing to ourselves with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, making melody in our hearts to the Lord. And I believe even as Brother Mark has wheeled into surgery, he's going to be singing the praises of the Lord, knowing that God is with him, and we're going to see a tremendous victory of healing and deliverance. So we're going to trust God tonight, and I'm going to ask all of us to be part of this. Let me just move this table so I can do that. And we're going to believe God to just minister in a very special way. As Diana shared with you, she has been part of Creekside, part of our family for over 20 years. We've had the privilege of seeing her enthusiasm, her excitement, and her willingness. You know how hard it is to learn a language? Going on language number 4. And we're asking God to give you grace and strength and to help you to be able to do that. So Dan, if you come and stand right here, if you would please. And Mark, would you come up and stand over here?